From New Delhi, you're watching DD India, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in News Hour. India's Operation Sindoor hits 9 terror sites in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. No military targets struck. Global reactions support India's strike against terror. World leaders now urging restraint and de-escalation. Social media battles misinformation surge. India's fact-check unit from the Government of India debunks fake posts, maintains strict vigil. And nationwide civil defense drills and blackouts test India's emergency preparedness. India on Wednesday released multiple videos showing its armed forces striking terror camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. 9 terrorist camps linked to groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Hizbul Mujahideen were targeted and destroyed under Operation Sindoor to avenge the deadly April 22 attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. Fuzail Ahmed has the report.
Operation Sindoor launched. On May 7, 2025, 9 sites targeted. Terrorist infrastructure targeted in POJK and Pakistan. Justice was served for the victims of Pahalgam terror attacks on Wednesday as Indian Armed Forces launched Operation Sindoor, hitting terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan. Terrorist attacks were planned and directed from these camps against India.
Investigations into the Pahalgam terror attack have brought out the communication notes of terrorists in and to Pakistan. The claims made by the Resistance Front and their reposting by known social media handles of the Lashkar-e-Taiba speak for themselves. Identification of the attackers based on eyewitness accounts as well as other information available to law enforcement agencies has also progressed. Our intelligence has developed an accurate picture of the planners and backers of this team. The features of this attack also tie in with Pakistan's long track record of perpetrating cross-border terrorism in India, which is well documented and beyond question. Pakistan also has a well-deserved reputation as a haven for terrorists from around the world, with internationally proscribed terrorists enjoying impunity there. In addition, Pakistan has been known to willfully mislead the world and international forums, such as the Financial Action Task Force, on this issue.
India demonstrated considerable restraint in selection of targets and method of execution. The actions were focused, measured, and non-escalatory in nature. No Pakistani military facilities were targeted.
9 terrorist camps were targeted and successfully destroyed. Over the last 3 decades, Pakistan has systematically built terror infrastructure. It is a complex web of recruitment and indoctrination centers, training areas for initial and refresher courses, and launch pads for handlers. These camps are located both in Pakistan as well as Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir areas. Some of the well-known training camps are located, as you can see on the screen. They are distributed from Savai Nala in the north, counting to approximately 21, ending at Bhagalpur to the south.
Altogether, 9 sites were targeted. They are Savai Nala Camp, one of the most important camps of LET and is used for recruitment, registration and training of LET cadres. This camp was functional since early 2000. It is 30 kilometers from the line of control in Tangdhar sector. Saidna Bilal Camp is the main center of JEM in POJK, located opposite Red Fort, Muzaffarabad. This facility is used as a transit camp for JEM terrorists prior to their launching into JNK. Gulpur Camp, Kotli, is 30 kilometers from the line of control, active base of LET terrorists in Rajouri, Punch. 2611 mastermind Zaki-ur-Rahman Lakhvi used to give speeches here. Abbas Camp, Kotli, is 13 kilometers from the line of control training center for LET suicide bombers. This camp used to train around 50 terrorists. Barnala Camp, Bhimber, is 9 kilometers from the line of control used to train weapons, IED manufacturing and jungle survival. Sarjal Camp, Sialkot, in Pakistan, is 6 kilometers from the international border. The terrorists responsible for the killing of 4 Jammu and Kashmir police personnel were trained here. Mehmuna Zoya Camp, Sialkot in Pakistan, is 12 kilometers from the international border, a major center of Hizbul Mujahideen. The attack on Pathankot Air Force Base was planned here. Markaz Tayyaba Muridke is 25 kilometers from the international border, headquarters of Lashkar-e-Taiba. Terrorists Ajmal Kasab and David Coleman Headley, involved in the 2008 Mumbai attacks, trained here. Markaz Subhan, Bahawalpur, is 100 kilometers from the international border, headquarters of Jaish-e-Mohammed. Terror commanders like Masood Azhar used to give instructions from here.
सवाई नाला कैंप मुजफ्फराबाद, जो कि पीओजेके के लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल से 30 किलोमीटर दूर है, यह एक लश्कर तौयबा का ट्रेनिंग सेंटर था। 20 अक्टूबर 2024 सोनमर्ग, 24 अक्टूबर 24 गुलमर्ग, 22 अप्रैल 2025 पहलगाम, इन हमलों के आतंकियों ने यहीं से प्रशिक्षण लिया था।
These steps came in the wake of the barbaric Pahalgam terrorist attack in which 25 Indians and 1 Nepali citizen were murdered. Fuzail Ahmed's report for DD India.
And with India carrying out precision strikes on terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri briefed envoys and representatives of 13 UN Security Council member countries in New Delhi on Wednesday and conveyed that New Delhi's response to April 22 Pahalgam terror attack has been targeted, measured and non-escalatory. The Foreign Secretary said Pahalgam was a barbaric terror attack and everyone saw what it was. The Indian Armed Forces launched Operation Sindoor, hitting terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, from where terrorist attacks against India have been planned and directed. And soon after the focused strikes on terrorists and terror infrastructure in Pakistan, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval also briefed his counterparts across the world about Operation Sindoor and made it clear that perpetrators of terror have been targeted in this operation without hurting any civilian. World leaders expressed solidarity with India in the fight against terrorism and called for restraint. Here's our report.
Soon after the focused strikes on terrorists and terrorist infrastructure at 9 sites in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir as part of Operation Sindoor, NSA Ajit Doval spoke with NSAs of several countries including US NSA and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, UK NSA Jonathan Powell, Saudi NSA Musaid Al-Aiban, UAE NSA H.H. Sheikh Tahnoon, Secretary General of NSC of UAE Ali Al-Shamsi, and NSA of Japan Masataka Okano. Contact was also established with Russian NSA Sergei Shoigu, member of Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee and Minister of Foreign Affairs of PRC Wang Yi, and diplomatic advisor to French President Emmanuel Bon. NSA briefed his counterparts on actions taken and methods of execution, which was measured, non-escalatory and restrained. He emphasized that India had no intent to escalate, but was well prepared to retaliate resolutely should Pakistan decide to escalate. Global leaders have urged restraint and expressed solidarity with India in the fight against terror. Israel has extended its support to New Delhi, defending its right to self-defense. Israeli ambassador to India, Roy Nazar, wrote on social media platform X, and I quote, Israel supports India's right to self-defense. Terrorists should know that there is no place to escape from their heinous crimes against innocents. End quote. Reacting to Operation Sindoor, US President Donald Trump said, and I quote, people knew based on some of the past experiences that something was going to happen. Hope that the fighting between the two countries will end soon. End quote. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' spokesperson said that the UN chief is very concerned and has called on both nuclear-armed Asian neighbors to exercise maximum military restraint. The UAE's Foreign Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan urged both India and Pakistan to exercise restraint, de-escalate tensions, and avoid further escalation. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot has also called on India and Pakistan to exercise restraint. The Russian Foreign Ministry said that it condemns all forms of terrorism and it was deeply concerned by the growing military confrontation between India and Pakistan. China's Foreign Ministry spokesman also called on both sides to exercise restraint. Qatar's Foreign Ministry said that it is deeply concerned about the ongoing tensions between India and Pakistan and called for resolving the crisis through diplomatic means. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy in a statement said, UK was clear in its condemnation of the horrific terrorist attack in Pahalgam last month. UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy in a statement said, and I quote, UK was clear in its condemnation of the horrific terrorist attack in Pahalgam last month. We need all sides to work urgently to see regional stability restored and ensure protection of civilians. End quote. Former British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak strongly supported India in its fight against terrorism. He said, and I quote, no nation should have to accept terrorist attacks being launched against it from land controlled by another country. India is justified in striking terrorist infrastructure. There can be no impunity for terrorists. End quote. Bureau Report, DD India.
And Prime Minister Narendra Modi convened a high-level meeting with the Union Cabinet post-Operation Sindoor. Political leaders across party lines have lauded the Indian Army. The Defence Minister said that India exercised its right to respond. The nation celebrated justice done by the armed forces under the leadership of the Prime Minister.
Once again, India was compelled to exercise its rights to pound rogue terror outfits operating from across the borders, disturbing peace and prosperity time and again. In a powerful message to those who threaten peace, the Indian Armed Forces launched precision strikes at 9 locations, targeting terror infrastructure across the border. This comes in the wake of the barbaric Pahalgam terror attack where 25 Indians and 1 Nepali citizen were martyred. Just hours after Operation Sindoor was initiated, Prime Minister Narendra Modi convened a high-level meeting with the Union Cabinet. The entire cabinet stood united in support of the armed forces and hailed the strike. Prime Minister Modi also briefed President Draupadi Murmu at Rashtrapati Bhavan on the overnight developments. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh called the operation a demonstration of India's sovereign right and praised the armed forces for their precision, alertness and sensitivity.
भारत की सेना ने सटीकता, सतर्कता और संवेदनशीलता के साथ कार्रवाई की है। हमने जो लक्ष्य तय किए थे उन्हें ठीक समय तय योजना के अनुसार सटीकता से उन्होंने ध्वस्त किया है और किसी भी नागरिक ठिकाने सिविलियन पॉपुलेशन को जरा भी प्रभावित न होने देने की संवेदनशीलता भी हमारी सेना ने दिखाई है।
As the operation unfolded, Union Home Minister Amit Shah chaired a crucial meeting with chief ministers, DGPs and chief secretaries of border states. Leaders across the political spectrum voiced strong support. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar urged the global community to adopt zero tolerance for terrorism.
हमारे दुश्मन देशों को संदेश ले लेना चाहिए कि हम लोगों को उनके चप्पे चप्पे की खबर है, एक एक ठिकाने की खबर है और आगे ऐसे और एक्शन लेना होगा तो हम लोग उतनी ही मजबूती से।
The opposition also put politics aside. The Congress party and its leader Rahul Gandhi extended full support to the government and armed forces. MP Asauddin Owaisi also welcomed the decisive action under Operation Sindoor. From grief to justice. Families of the Pahalgam victims expressed relief and pride after the strikes. Many call the operation absolutely necessary to deliver a strong message against terrorism.
बहुत धन्यवाद करती हूँ, उनसे बहुत थैंक यू कहती हूँ कि उन्होंने मेरे पति की मौत का बदला लिया है। जिस तरीके से हमारे पूरे परिवार को उन पे विश्वास था, उन्होंने उसी तरीके से जवाब देके हमारे विश्वास को कायम रखा है।
मोदी साहब ने बदला लिया है। सेना के जवानों को यही मैसेज देना चाहती हूँ कि आगे बढ़ते रहो।
Across cities, towns and villages, citizens stood united. From Delhi to Dibrugarh, slogans of Bharat Mata Ki Jai and Vande Mataram echoed through the streets. India saluted its brave soldiers and celebrated their firm stand against terror.
पहलगाम का जो बदला लिया है, इसके लिए मैं बहुत ही धन्यवाद करता हूं प्रधानमंत्री का।
अभी तो कुछ भी नहीं जवाब दिया, हम तो चाहते हैं कि इतना मुंह तोड़ जवाब देना चाहिए कि दुश्मन हमेशा के लिए याद रखे।
15 दिन के अंदर अंदर पाकिस्तान को मुंह तोड़ का जवाब दिया गया है भारतीय सेना ने, और पाकिस्तान को अभी अकल आनी चाहिए।
But even as the dust settled, Pakistan resorted to provocation, violating the ceasefire with artillery fire in Jammu and Kashmir's Dinmer Gully. The Indian Army responded with equal resolve, underscoring that every threat will be met with strength. Operation Sindoor is not just a military operation, it's a message that India will not stay silent in the face of terror. A message of unity, resilience and unwavering resolve. Tripti Tripathi for DD India.
And DD India's Jessica Taneja now joins us with more. Jessica, give us an account of India's diplomatic outreach to complement Operation Sindoor.
Well, you heard from the External Affairs Minister say that the world must show zero tolerance for terrorism, and this is what India would want to sort of tell its partners and allies across the world. And now, given that, let me also take you briefly to the conversations the Foreign Minister, the External Affairs Minister, India's Foreign Minister, has had with his counterparts across the world, and at the moment as we speak, Mark. And what I can see is he's spoken to the foreign ministers of Spain, of Germany, and we're given to understand that the Iranian foreign minister could also arrive in New Delhi late at night, but those details are still awaited. But as we speak, Mark, India has made all effort possible to tell its both allies and partners about Pakistan's link to the terror outfits that emanate from its soil. Starting with, of course, when the Pahalgam attack took place, all the envoys in New Delhi were briefed by the Foreign Secretary, and today as well, after Operation Sindoor was conducted successfully, were also briefed in New Delhi again. 13, as we're given to understand from your report as well. Yes. Apart from that, if you see, the National Security Advisor has also spoken to counterparts of 8 other nations. That includes the United States, United Kingdom, France. So we're expecting more that India would do at this front in order to bring out Pakistan and other perpetrators who have been responsible for these heinous attacks on Indian soil for the last many decades, Mark.
Jessica, how understanding has the international community been of India's position as a measured response and non-escalatory?
That's correct. You heard from the Foreign Secretary this morning when he stressed on the fact that none of the economic or military facilities were targeted. This is a non-escalatory response from India's end, simply reserving the right to respond to any terror attack on its soil, and this one relates to Pahalgam, which in the Union Territory, of Jammu and Kashmir. What we've seen so far from our counterparts in the United States and the United Kingdom, you'd recall, Mark, United States Vice President J.D. Vance was in India on the 22nd of April. He was in Jaipur delivering a lecture when the Pahalgam terror attack took place. He went on Fox News a few days ago, and I quote him, he had said that the United States, will not oppose an Indian response as long as it does not lead to a broader regional conflict. So, of course, you heard from House Speaker Mike Johnson as well that India is an important partner and remains to be one, and it reserves the right to respond to any of the terror threats. And even if when you talk about United Nations Security Council, there have been meetings that have been held, India has been gaining support, especially when it has been able to point out on how Pakistan somehow hasn't been able to act on the terror-related activities on its soil. And if I may just add, India, like last time, had prepared a strong dossier which would have all the forensic and the testimonial proof which would link Pakistan to the Pahalgam attack, and that is perhaps what the Foreign Secretary briefed the envoys, the 13 envoys here in New Delhi, and will continue to be India's effort at multinational forums as well as multilateral initiatives and talks that are conducted in the future to highlight how India has been at the receiving end of this terror menace for a very long time now.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Jessica Taneja, for joining us with those inputs. You're watching DD India Newshour. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we'll be discussing the Operation Sindoor in some detail. Stay with us. Well, for decades, India has confronted relentless terrorism originating from Pakistan. Tonight, we examine this enduring challenge, the attacks, the impact, and India's firm response to cross-border terrorism. The next report tells us how India has faced terrorism from Pakistan.
While the world embraced a new millennium, India continued to be subject to cross-border terrorism planned and executed from Pakistan. India, in fact, has been a victim of terrorism originating from Pakistan for a significant period. Major terror attacks in India have been attributed to groups based in or supported by Pakistan, and these attacks include the 2001 attack on the Indian Parliament, an attack on the very temple of Indian democracy, 9 killed, 18 injured. The 2002 Akshardham temple attack in Gandhinagar, 31 killed, 80 injured. A series of coordinated attacks in Mumbai in 2008 by Lashkar-e-Taiba operatives, 164 killed, over 300 injured. In 2016 Uri attack, 4 terrorists belonging to Pak-based Jaish-e-Mohammed attacked the Indian Army Brigade headquarters in Uri, 20 killed, 21 injured. Considered the deadliest attack on Indian security forces in Kashmir in nearly 2 decades at that time. The attacks did not stop. In 2016, an attack on an Indian Air Force base in Pathankot. In 2019, Pulwama attack, a suicide bombing in J&K targeting Indian security personnel, 40 killed, 5 injured. The latest that shook the national conscience was the Pahalgam attack in April 2025, resulting in the killing of 26 civilians, 17 others injured. More than 350 Indian civilians have succumbed to cross-border terrorism in the past decade and 800 injured in these dastardly acts of violence. Over 600 security personnel have laid down their lives and more than 1,400 injured while protecting the nation from this scourge of cross-border terrorism. India's response has involved a mix of strategies. India has consistently raised the issue of cross-border terrorism with Pakistan and the international community. Security measures include strengthening domestic security, intelligence and counter-terrorism operations. India did not sit quiet. The 2016 surgical strikes conducted after the Uri attack targeting terrorist launch pads in Pakistan-occupied Jammu Kashmir. The 2019 Balakot airstrikes launched after the Pulwama attack targeting a Jaish-e-Mohammed camp in Pakistan. Following the Pahalgam attack, India conducted precision missile strikes on alleged terrorist infrastructure in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. In short, India has faced a long history of terrorism linked to Pakistan and has employed various diplomatic, security and military means to counter this threat. The situation remains tense, particularly after the recent Pahalgam attack and India's retaliatory strikes. Bureau Report, DD India.
Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Central Air Command, and TCA Raghavan is a former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. Ambassador Raghavan, let me start with you now. Pakistan has consistently used terrorism as a tool, a strategic tool in a sense, against India. And despite global warnings to the contrary, why are certain members of the of the global community still asking India for restraint when India has acted in a measured way?
The countries see different regional situations in terms of their own national interests. They won't, so those countries which call for restraint or which make statements on those lines are seeing the current situation in terms of their own interests and their own perspective. The fact is, we have to deal with a very, very recalcitrant neighbor and take measures such as are necessary to prevent further attacks of the kind which took place in Pahalgam and to provide security to our own citizens. That is the elementary and most fundamental task of any government. So quite regardless of what individual members of foreign countries may say, every country has to act in its own interest as it sees it. And therefore, that some response was required or that a cocktail of responses was required, including diplomatic, political, and also kinetic steps, was therefore essential in the current circumstances.
Air Marshal Sinha, you know, I mean, does Pakistan's failure, you know, to dismantle the terror infrastructure warrant a more, a more strong, a more serious response than India has already given in terms of military response? What would you say?
First of all, I would like to, for the successful conduct of Operation Sindoor, I would like to compliment the Prime Minister, the Defence Minister and the Indian Armed Forces for a very precise and decisive attack on 9 of the terror training camps, including their headquarters. It is a great achievement, and it has created a sense of happiness among people who were very disturbed by this dastardly act of killing 26 innocent people. Now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, it is the ideology of the Pakistan army to propagate terror into India, and it is unlikely that this ideology is going to change. Earlier, we were targeting a specific camp during the surgical strike and the Balakot airstrike. But this time, we have taken the entire terror organization of Pakistan. And I am sure that Pakistan is unlikely to react this time because they are facing tremendous internal crisis. Their economy is down. They have sold their war reserve weapons to Ukraine to earn some money. There is secessionist movements in Balochistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sindh and Punjab are fighting with each other. So Pakistan is not in a position to retaliate immediately. But this terror activity is likely to continue. It will remain suppressed for some time, like it happened after the Pahalgam incident. But what is required is that now India needs to be focused. Every time Pakistan tries something, we have to ensure that the penalty is very, very severe. Something that needs to wake them up and make them refrain from thinking another action. So this is very important. Our response has to be very, very extreme. We cannot let them pass away by doing some small acts of 1 or 2 terrorist attacks. We should retaliate heavily.
Okay. We are also joined by Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, retired strategic and security affairs expert. Thank you very much, General Hasnain, for being with us. Now, given that Air Marshal Sinha says that our response should be stronger, how, in a military response, how precise have we been so far in our strikes to avoid civilian and military casualties? Or escalation, actually?
Mark, we started with the surgical strikes in 2016, ratcheted it up to 2019 with the Balakot strike, that's the Jabba Top strike. We didn't have the necessary precision technologies at that time. And now we have gone to the next higher level, in fact, the next to next higher level, and also decided to go for multiple targets at the same time, which is 9 targets along a front of approximately 700 kilometers. I think this is a fairly high calibration that we have achieved. And what the government was doing, essentially, the Indian government and the Indian Armed Forces, is still moving from a level of messaging which was done in the surgical strikes and the Balakot strike to now a level of strategic deterrence. I think somewhere in the Indian government and the Indian Armed Forces system, they must have decided as to what is the required calibration which will ensure that this does not spiral out into something which is conventional and uncontrollable. So I think an element of caution is always kept in this. And at the same time, the question is, can the objectives be achieved?
Okay.
I would say yes, in this case, the objectives have been achieved to a very great extent. Strategic deterrence along with strategic messaging has been sent out adequately to Pakistan. I would also look at it from a different angle, if I can explain. We have hit three locations in the center of gravity of Pakistan: Bahawalpur, Muridke, and Sialkot.
Right.
These are the locations also of some of the strategic elements of the Pakistan Armed Forces. The message should be clear: if we can hit with precision a terrorist camp, a terrorist facility, holding facility, headquarter, or anything of that kind, then we are definitely capable of taking out any Pakistan military capability too. That's the strategic message going out, and that is the deterrence angle here. I think that should be very clear to the people there. And we will see now, when the response comes from Pakistan, how far will this response go? That will give us the idea of how effective was our decision making in terms of the quantum of objectives chosen and the delivery of munitions that we decided at that particular time. To my mind, Pakistan does not have the capability to pursue a conventional war. It doesn't have the economy. It doesn't have the resources today. 3 to 5 days is all about them. They can fight. But they've got one weapon in their quiver, and that is the weapon of irrationality. A decision taken against the run of play. And that is something no one can determine or work against.
Indeed. Ambassador Raghavan, why is Operation Sindoor in line with international law and also in line with counter-terrorism operations worldwide?
Self-defense is a part of the sovereign right of any country. So when you are facing major terrorist attacks and there is a clear finger of suspicion pointing to the direction of those attacks and the source of those attacks, any government has the right to respond and to take counter-terrorism measures. So that goes without saying. It's well established in terms of practices internationally for many years. Now.
Air Marshal Sinha, does Pakistan's repeated failure to act against terrorists, reduce its global credibility, and also this nuclear brinkmanship, is it being used as a shield, in fact, to try and support terror groups on its soil? Under the guise of being a nuclear state.
Actually, Pakistan's credibility has always been low. It has been in the grey list of FATF for such a long period, and it might go back again. As far as the nuclear brinkmanship is concerned, Pakistan is fully aware that India is also a nuclear power, and our nuclear doctrine talks of no first use. But if Pakistan decides to use nuclear weapons, then the retaliation will be so severe and the loser will be Pakistan. So this nuclear rattling is just kind of hollow threat that they keep giving. It does not make sense because whatever they do, they are going to receive much more than what they try to do against India. So it will be foolish on their part to try and get into the nuclear domain. Conventional, yes, they can try something, but the effect will be very, very limited because they do not have the wherewithal now to continue with conventional warfare for a long time, more than 3 to 4 days.
General Hasnain, how have the past attacks, we had a report on the past attacks, some of them, we left out quite a few actually, there were many more attacks from Pakistan, terror attacks. The big attacks like 26/11, Pulwama, how have these shaped our response towards cross-border terrorism?
See, Mark, over a period of time, of course, we have been able to reduce the overall footprint of terror inside the Kashmir Valley. I can tell you, for example, I was 25 years ago a colonel at the Avantipur Victor Force headquarters of the Rashtra Rifles. And I distinctly remember on a single day, I would be handling up to 12 to 14 engagements going on the ground just in South Kashmir. Today, if there is one engagement in the better part of 2 months, is considered to be something great. So we have actually controlled it to a very great extent. The strength was 3,000 to 3,500 terrorists at one time. With the construction of the LC fence. Mathematics of terror went into our favor, and we started killing, eliminating far more than the number which could infiltrate or get recruited. And that upset the whole chain. From 2001 onwards till 2019-20, the strength finally came down to 100 to 130 terrorists. That itself is a huge achievement. But at the end of the day, 100 to 130 terrorists, to eliminate that will take an entire army, and you may not be able to do it. So that is what we have to work against, to make sure that the small strength of terrorists, no more infiltration, no more surge, nothing like this should take place anywhere. And an attack such as the one in Pahalgam, it is completely against the run of play.
Yes.
We have to ensure a higher grade of intelligence and readiness for it, so that none of this can happen in the future. Otherwise, we have had huge attacks in the past, and with very high strength of terrorists in the valley at that time to support it. But today, to have a big attack is actually, in a way, we have to make sure that with the kind of strength which is available to the terrorists in the valley, that must not be allowed to happen.
Ambassador Raghavan, has India, exhausted all diplomatic options before using military force, or are diplomatic options always, something that is available, and really they complement the military action as well?
What we have, I think, the present kinetic measures which have been taken have to be seen as part of a larger cocktail.
Right.
And very significant diplomatic sanctions were announced earlier, and perhaps in times to come we will also come to the conclusion that the strategic impact of those diplomatic measures announced, and especially with regard to the Indus Waters Treaty, is much more weighty than any tactical or kinetic steps you take. But having said that, I do think that a cocktail was required, and a cocktail has been delivered. But we must remember we are at the early state of this crisis. As was mentioned, we have to see what happens next. And in that context, diplomacy and a political negotiation is always the preferred and the final outcome of any crisis situation. As the Prime Minister had said in another context, we are not living in an era of war. And that applies equally to South Asia and to our own neighborhood. So we should never foreclose the diplomacy option because in the end, that is going to be the most effective way of moving forward and addressing this crisis.
I beg your pardon, Air Marshal Sinha, Pakistan is obviously going through some economic crisis. There's a lot of political instability in Pakistan as well. The military-backed institutions continue to hold sway. Has this really been the big problem that Pakistan has? And it really hasn't, as a country, been able to get over its instability, and it's unlikely to because of the nature of its governance.
True. Pakistan has always had sectarian violence because there has never been peace. One sect has been fighting with another sect. The minorities have been almost eliminated out there. And if you see what is happening today, Balochistan is carrying on a very strong secessionist movement. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is in fire. The Sindh and Punjab province are fighting with each other with respect to some creation of canals on the Sindh River. And now with reduced water, there will be more problems. So Pakistan has got its own serious internal issues. But the basic ideology on which Pakistan was created, that they are different from India, does not hold good, because if that was the right ideology, then Bangladesh should have never separated from Pakistan.
Right.
And neither would all these segments like Balochistan and all wanting to separate out. So the ideology which is being pursued primarily because the army is in power, and it is the army ideology which is flowing from the madrasas and the masjids, which is not what the Pakistanis wanted, but they have no control over it. The political powers have no say in this. And recently the army chief of Pakistan made it very clear as to what Pakistan's ideology is and what should be taught to the young generation for next 3-4 generations so that it does not fade away from that thought process. So this is what Pakistan is all about.
Gentlemen, stay with us as we play out this next story, which is largely about the propaganda and psychological war that's also been started. Now, India's enemies remain relentless, whether along the borders or in cyberspace, but the nation stands prepared. The Indian government is acting with resolve, fortifying our defense, not just with weapons, but with the truth. You know, from exposing misinformation to dismantling Pakistan-backed propaganda networks, every step is aimed at safeguarding citizens from psychological warfare. DD India's Rahul Upadhyay reports. The enemies of India are never at rest. Whether it's the borders or digital space, the rogue elements are always at mischief on multiple fronts. But India is ready. The government has taken decisive action, strengthening its defenses not just on the ground but in cyberspace. The Indian government's fact-check unit under the Press Information Bureau has ramped up its efforts to debunk false narratives being circulated online. As the Indian armed forces struck terror camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir on Wednesday, a parallel war unfolded on social media, with fake videos, misleading images, and unverified claims flooding platforms like X and Facebook. The fact-check unit has issued clarifications on its social media platforms addressing misinformation related to the April 22 terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam that killed 26 people. What started as a focused and effective military operation by the Indian Armed Forces has now spiraled into a chaotic online propaganda war. Pro-Pakistan social media handles and even influential political figures are deliberately spreading fake news, fabricating stories of miraculous military victories and heroic retaliation that simply do not exist. Their goal is clear: to flood the information space with falsehoods so quickly and overwhelmingly that it becomes difficult to separate fact from fiction. This goes beyond mere misinformation. It's a deliberate, orchestrated effort to warp reality, mislead the masses, and shape public perception to serve a specific agenda. In a blatant effort to hijack the narrative and distract from the reality on the ground, Pakistan's state-affiliated accounts have turned to their familiar playbook, recycling outdated images, misrepresenting old videos, and inventing completely fabricated claims. However, the Indian government has taken decisive steps to combat misinformation by banning several Pakistani social media platforms known for spreading false narratives. But new mischievous ones keep cropping up every now and then. Rahul Upadhyay's report, DD India. And in fact, post the surgical strike on terror hubs in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, full-scale civil defense mock drills were also held across the country on Wednesday to assess India's preparedness for emergency response. The drills aimed at sensitizing and mobilizing civilians in case of an emergency, and they were carried out across major cities including Delhi, Mumbai, Pune, Bengaluru, Lucknow, Gwalior, Patna, and also in states of the northeast. Now, these measures included a provision of a crash blackout session, or many sessions in fact, and provisions for early camouflaging of vital installations and the updation of evacuation plan and rehearsal. In Delhi, in fact, a thorough mock drill was conducted at the the New Delhi Municipal Corporation Council, New Delhi Municipal Council, I beg your pardon, NDMC, and that was at their office, and at the bustling Khan Market, simulating emergency situations. As part of the mock drill, multiple states and cities such as Delhi, Mumbai, Punjab, Gwalior, Patna witnessed power blackouts for around 10 to 15 minutes on Wednesday. And during these blackouts, power supply was cut to shield areas against enemy attack. Let's turn once again to our guests. General Hasnain, are biased news reports influencing global diplomatic reactions to this operation?
See, Mark, mostly the legitimacy and reputation of Pakistani handles are well known around the world. But having said that, I'll say that the ISPR, the Inter-Services Public Relations Wing of the Pakistan Armed Forces, is a past master at this and has been at it very long. Most people in India will not know this, but the ISPR was set up in 1948. It predates the ISI by many years. And it means that Pakistan, as a smaller nation compared to India, understood the importance of information, psychological warfare and information warfare very early in its existence. And therefore, the ISPR has been dishing out all kinds of propaganda against India around the world. I can tell you this, that if you go to various countries around the world where you would not even expect Pakistanis to be present, you may find them there sitting with you on a breakfast table, like I found in Israel during the Herzliya summit, where I found that Pakistan, with no diplomatic relations with Israel, was still represented at the Herzliya summit. And I found more Pakistanis in the Tel Aviv University than Indians. So this kind of a thing does cut ice somewhere or the other, and people do tend to sort of give them credibility. Now, I'm getting questions from lots and lots of friends in Canada and the United States, those who served with me in the United Nations, asking me about questions about all this information which is being dished out by Pakistan at the moment. And I, as a single man from my side, I'm sure many others are doing it, I am attempting to neutralize all this fake information which is being put out. But much of it is going across. Right. And probably some people in these countries are believing this also, from a credibility angle.
Indeed, and Ambassador Raghavan, is the Indian government effectively countering, this disinformation through fact-checking, or is, a lot more required in terms of, let's say, the entire media has to go about doing this fact-checking, not only the government to that extent?
Well, there's always scope for doing more and doing a better job. Sometimes the shrillness of our private media in countering disinformation, their shrillness can be also counterproductive. But while I don't want to sound complacent, in my own view, Pakistan's own reputation is so poor, and the reputational damage it has suffered on the terrorism question for the past decade and a half is so severe that in my reading at least, these disinformation campaigns do not have much of an impact. I think on the whole, whether they say it or not, most countries recognize the grave provocations that India has been subjected to by a most recalcitrant neighbor, and recognize the fact that the government has to inevitably take steps of a counter-terrorism nature to safeguard its interests and to safeguard its citizens. So while these social media campaigns and these disinformation campaigns, while a great deal of effort is put into them by the ISPR and by other agencies in Pakistan, to my mind, the output from this is relatively limited because of the poor reputation which Pakistan has accumulated over the past decade and a half, 2 decades.
Air Marshal Sinha, how would you view this, because there are certain foreign media also which seem to be sympathetic to Pakistan in some way. They portray Pakistan as a victim. To what extent should the government of India, or actually the Indian media, counter this because it's clear propaganda?
See, whenever fake news comes, there are agencies within India which are countering it. But there are a lot of contradictions within the fake news itself. If you see, the ISPR has claimed 5 fighters and 1 UAV. Immediately after that, the Defense Minister of Pakistan says that none of the Indian aircraft violated the Pakistani airspace. They all fired weapons from the Indian side. So if no aircraft entered Pakistan, how did they shoot them? Their weapons are not at the border or at the LC. So there is a lot of contradiction amongst this. But what happens is that the social media generally affects youngsters who tend to read something and tend to believe it.
Yes.
But they are not in the decision-making cycle. So when you interact with youngsters, they will have a different viewpoint. And it will be divided depending on how many are subjected to fake news and how many are subjected to real news. It is, none of them are looking for truth. They just gobble up whatever comes their way because they're running short of time, traveling from office to work, office to home and vice versa. That is the time they're catching up on all these issues. But when it comes to decision making amongst nations, then like the earlier speakers had mentioned, that Pakistan does not have much credibility.
Okay.
So the moment you have that Pakistani tag to a message, it will not carry that kind of weightage amongst the government circles and the decision making circles.
I will leave it there. Thank you very much, General Atta Hasnain, Air Marshal Sinha, and Ambassador T.C.A. Raghavan. Thank you very much for putting this Operation Sindoor into the right perspective and giving us a clear idea about India's goals and the precision with which these strikes were carried out and the objectives that were achieved. And that's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour. But let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those of you on the go, get the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. It's available on Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code and download it now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Mark Lynn from all of us here in Delhi. Thank you for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.